Why, hello there, Minnesota Vikings fans. It's your old pal Jacob here. And tonight, I will be giving my thoughts and opinions on the 2026 Minnesota Vikings schedule as of schedule release day, which is May 14th. And boy, oh boy, do we have an interesting schedule, all things considered here. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right into it. So yeah, week 1 is a home game versus the Green Bay Packers. That is right, ladies and gentlemen. Week 1 is at home versus Green Bay as part of their Game of the Week, or America's Game of the Week, 3:25 p.m. game time. And of course, anytime you open up the season against a team like Green Bay or any sort of big rival, you know that's going to be a hot item. And again, it'll be interesting to see with Jordan Love and a lot of turnover on that offense. No Romeo Doubs, no Dontavian Wicks. Micah Parsons is probably going to be out for this game too. It'll be interesting to see here. But yeah, again, Kyler Murray, J.J. McCarthy, whoever wins that battle week 1 is going to have one heck of a season premiere against the hated ones in Green Bay at home. And then week 2 is in Chicago. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, we won't have to go to Soldier Field when it's negative 100 degrees out. But we still have to go up against guys like Caleb Williams. We still have to go up against Ben Johnson. We still have to go up against one heck of a squad. And thankfully, this is a noon game. But yeah, like I say, Chicago is probably going to be one of the front runners to win the NFC North. If not Green Bay, possibly Detroit. But it seems like it's either going to be Green Bay or Chicago if you listen to the media and stuff like that. And we get them back-to-back weeks to start the season. So yeah, we could either be 0-2, 1-1, or 2-0 in the division before we even hit the end of September. And then week 3, we travel to Tampa Bay to take on Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers at 3:05, which is kind of an interesting game there, or interesting time, just because typically the 3:05 games are a lot more like the West Coast. Like if we were to play, like, say, the Broncos, Niners, Seahawks, or one of those teams. But this is going to be interesting considering we're going to be East Coast, and it's a 3:05 game, which will be 4:05 Tampa time. And, of course, Tampa Bay will be without arguably one of their, if not their best all-time receivers in Mike Evans. But obviously, you know, we haven't beat Tampa Bay in a while. Granted, we haven't played them, I think, since Tom Brady was quarterback. Or I don't even know if I can't even remember. It's been a while since we've played Tampa Bay, but I know Baker Mayfield, he's going to have those guys ready to go. Bucky Irving. There's a lot of pieces on defense that are going to be missing for Tampa Bay, but again, it'll be interesting to see because, again, it's still a relatively early game in the season. And then week 4, we take on the Dolphins at home at 3:05 Central Standard Time. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, if you're hearing this correctly, we have 2 straight 3:05 Central Standard Time games. I don't know if I've ever seen a Vikings home game that was 3:05 Central Standard Time. But again, Malik Willis a depleted offense, a depleted defense with a lot of young players coming to town. It'll be intriguing to see what we do against them, especially with it being, I think, either the last week of September or the first week of October, kind of around that time of year. But yeah, I mean, hopefully we can get it done against the Dolphins because, especially at this point, I don't know if they'll have everything together. But in typical Vikings fashion, I also wouldn't be surprised if that's one of those games we drop. But regardless, week 5, we travel to New Orleans to take on Tyler Shook and the Saints. Shout out to Trev, by the way. It is a noon game in the Bayou against an up-and-coming team where it'll be curious to see if Tyler Shook can continue what he did last year with Chris Olave, Jordan Tyson, the receiver that they just drafted out of Arizona State. Travis Etienne is there, as well as I saw Alvin Kamara. I mean, they're going to have some decent offensive pieces. Defense is going to be interesting. So, yeah, like I say, the offense for New Orleans could be fun. Defense, I'm not 100% sure. But again, it'll always be interesting to see just because New Orleans has always been an interesting matchup for the Minnesota Vikings, regardless of who you believe in, what you believe in, how good this team is, blah, 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 and whatnot. So, and then week 6, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of this, but week 6 is our bye week this year. I still would love to see this bye week more like week 8, 9, 10, kind of right around there. But I guess it is somewhat later than in years past, but I don't know. I'm always one of those who'd rather have the bye week about halfway through the season, maybe a week below or above halfway, however you want to phrase that there. Like week 8, 9, 10, maybe even 11. But, I mean, who knows? It'll be interesting to see. But then we come out of that game, week 7, and we take on our old pal Danny Dimes. Or potentially our old pal Danny Dimes. It'll be interesting to see if he's actually back by this game or not. And the Indianapolis Colts, in a game that's roughly around my birthday. It's either week 7 or week 8. I'm not 100% sure, but we host the Colts with the Daniel Jones experiment coming back into town. They lost one of their best receivers in Michael Pittman Jr., so it'll be interesting to see what the Colts look like coming into U.S. Bank Stadium. Also, our old buddy Cam Bynum will be back, among a couple of other guys. So who knows? I mean, that could be a very interesting matchup about halfway through the season here. And then week 8, we travel to Detroit for a noon game. Jared Goff, Amon-Ra, Jahmyr Gibbs, Aiden Hutchinson. I mean, it's going to be an interesting matchup to say the least there because, ironically enough, I'm pretty sure I think we swept the Lions, if I remember right, last year. I know we beat them in Detroit. And I'm pretty sure we beat them at home, too. Yeah, because that's right. We did beat them at home, too, because that was a game that Max Brosmer didn't throw for any yards, but the defense had like 5 touchdowns. So that's going to be interesting traveling into Detroit at week 8. Just because, again, Dan Campbell, that entire Lions offense, defense, I know that they kind of had one hell of a season last year with injuries, this, that, and the other thing. So, yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what they end up doing there. And then week 9, Monday Night Football, ladies and gentlemen, we host Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills, where last time we played Buffalo at home was Josh Allen's rookie year, and he literally hurdled our asses for a victory. And by the way, that was before the Buffalo Bills were the Buffalo Bills we know them as today. And then last time we played Buffalo in Buffalo, that was that crazy game where Josh Allen basically had the victory or had the game won, but he fumbled the ball in the end zone. Eric Kendricks picked it up, blah, 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 blah. We end up in overtime, and Patrick Peterson ended up sealing the victory in overtime. So that's the first time since that game that we'll play the Buffalo Bills at home on Monday night, nonetheless. So that's going to be a very intriguing match. And then week 10, we travel to Green Bay at noon. So very similar to week 1. By then, I would imagine that, the Green Bay Packers are going to be at full strength. Again, I just don't know how I feel about that receiving core and this and that and the other thing. Their offense in Green Bay has always been kind of their Achilles heel, really. But especially with losing guys like Dontavian Wicks, especially with losing guys like Romeo Doubs, who were actually pretty key pieces, unless Matthew Golden or one of those receivers takes like the next step, Christian Watson can stay healthy, Tucker Kraft steps back up again. It's going to be intriguing to see how that offense ends up going and moving. And then week 11, we travel south of the border to Mexico City to take on the San Francisco 49ers in about 7,000 plus feet altitude for the Sunday night game for week 11. I mean, Brock Purdy, there's going to be a hopefully healthy wide receiving core, Christian McCaffrey, Fred Warner, and the defense and that stuff. It's going to be interesting to see because now we're kind of getting towards that time of year where we're not 100% sure which teams are going to be healthy, which teams are going to be out, in, trade candidates, this, that, and the other things. But San Francisco in Mexico City, as, the 49ers are the home team, it'll be interesting to see just sort of how we fare against those guys. And then week 12, we take on the hefty lefties of the Atlanta Falcons in a noon game at US Bank Stadium. And the reason why I say that's because for whatever reason, the Atlanta Falcons, whenever there's a left-handed quarterback, they pounce on that, it seems like. Let's see, they had Mike Vick. They're going to have Tua Tagovailoa. Then now they also have Michael Penix with Tua. Basically, they are the left-handed hoarders of the NFL at this point. And will Tua be starting? Will it be Michael Penix? Who knows? They still do have a lot of offensive weapons because if you remember right, this was the week 2 game last year. I want to say our home opener, if I remember correctly, where we just got absolutely shellacked by Atlanta and Michael Penix, because that was sort of the game where J.J. McCarthy literally crapped himself and then got injured for like 6 weeks. So that kind of put him behind the 8 ball, this, that, and the other things. So, again, that's going to be very interesting to see how that ends up going or who's the quarterback, this, that, and the other thing. But, yeah. So, and then week 13, we host the Carolina Panthers at 3:25. So, yeah, week 13, Carolina comes to town with Bryce Young and a bunch of young guys like Ted McMillan, among others. That's also going to be interesting because Carolina, in my opinion, that NFC South is a very interesting division just because Carolina won last year by virtue of Atlanta beating, I want to say, was it the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or was it the New Orleans Saints? Regardless, the only reason why Carolina made the playoffs last year is because Atlanta won in week 18. And the NFC South isn't necessarily the strongest division, but by now, hopefully, we kind of have an understanding of just what teams are there, for lack of a better term. So, yeah. And then week 14, we travel to New England for Thursday night football. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Now we're going to be going into the games that have actual, like, elemental issues, for lack of a better term. The Patriots are going to be a very, very interesting team, just because I don't know if you've been following a lot of what's been going on in the offseason with Vrabel, Rossini, this, that, and the other thing. And also the fact that Drake May and the Patriots managed to somehow drag a squad that nobody, and I repeat, nobody, thought would be anywhere near the AFC Championship game, let alone the actual Super Bowl. So we'll see if New England can actually get, going here, if this is an actual good squad or what happens, this, that, and the other thing. But the fact that we travel to New England week 14, Thursday night, with weather potentially being an issue, that could be interesting. And then week 15, we host the Lions for Sunday night football. And again, kind of similar to my thoughts for when we play them week 8 in Detroit. How is this team going to look? Because a lot of people, going into last year thought that the Lions were potential NFC contenders, and injuries and this and that kind of derailed them. The fact that they lost both Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson probably hit them harder than we thought it would, or maybe a lot of the media thought it would. And by now, we'll understand just how good or bad the Detroit Lions actually are. Yeah, this is going to be a very intriguing matchup, especially if the Vikings are in any sort of a playoff contention. But yeah, week 15, Minnesota hosts the Lions on Sunday Night Football. And then week 16, we host the Commanders, but the time is a TBD. So I don't know if maybe that game could be a Saturday game, could be a Friday game, could be a third. I don't know. Because at this point, college football is probably more than likely either going to be in their bowl season, if not over by now. And then we host Jaden Daniels. We host Terry McLaurin. We host, hopefully, a healthy, revamped team with the guys like Frankie Louvu, among like Sonny Styles and those guys. But again, it's also going to be interesting just because, will Washington be healthy? Will the Vikings be healthy? What are these squads going to look like as we get into the last few weeks of the season? And remember, Washington 2 years ago was in the NFC Championship game. How people forget that Jaden Daniels brought this Washington Commanders team to the NFC Championship game against the Eagles, in which we all knew the Eagles would probably win, but it is what it is at the end of the day. They still gave up one hell of a fight, so this team is not a pushover. And then week 17, we travel to MetLife Stadium, and we take on those Jets at noon. So yeah, we're going to be going to probably another cold weather game at a stadium that has been known for being not the greatest on the players. I don't know. I mean, I would highly, highly doubt the Jets are going to be anywhere near competitive. But they do have some younger pieces. Obviously, we're probably going to be going up against our old pal in Harrison Phillips at this point. They have Geno Smith at this. Again, like I say, this Jets team, I don't even want to predict because I couldn't even tell you the beginning of how I feel about this squad. It's going to be interesting, but who knows? And then week 18 at home against the Chicago Bears. Again, to be determined. So, yeah, that could be a very interesting matchup just because Chicago, Minnesota, that could have a lot on the line at the end of the season. Maybe, maybe not. It's always so interesting, like, whenever we get these schedules and you look at some of these games at the end of the year where you're like, oh, this could be a pretty big game, or, oh, this could be a big game. But, injuries, bunch of stuff that we can't predict in May, between now and whenever these games are played. But hopefully this game has a lot of meaning. Or at the very least, hopefully the Minnesota Vikings are in a spot where they either lock up a playoff spot, or again, this is a very, very strong game for, either NFC North, who knows? But yeah. It's going to be a very interesting matchup this year, just because, again, Chicago, they got us one time very closely. We beat them week 1 last year. So, yeah. But yeah, basically to kind of wrap up the schedule review and stuff like that, this is going to be a very interesting season. Just because, again, there's some very interesting matchups. Again, week 1 versus the Packers, and then week 2 at the Bears. By the time we hit week 3, we could be 0-2, 1-1, or 2-0 in the division before we play our first non-division opponent. And then we take on the AFC East, which is going to be an interesting division because the Bills, you would expect them to still be a pretty top team. New England, that's going to be interesting to see. The Jets, the Dolphins, maybe not as much. But then the NFC South is very interesting just because who's going to win the NFC South? Like, which matchups do we believe are going to be important there, And then, of course, the Commanders, Lions, 49ers in Mexico City, among other games. Yeah, there's going to be some very interesting matchups that once we get closer to it, I'll definitely be sure to give my thoughts and opinions on basically all the offensive matchups, defensive matchups, special teams matchups, blah, 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 blah. But anyway, with all that said, I think I'll go ahead and wrap up this video for your 2026 Minnesota Vikings initial schedule launch. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Vikings football is coming whether you're ready or not. I still don't know how I feel about it yet, but just being honest here as a Vikings fan whose season last year was very rocky, to say the least. But with all that being said, though, this is Jacob. Skol Vikings. Can we get to football season soon enough here, please?